Hello, and welcome to today's presentation, the Actifio Masterclass webinar series. Today we'll be discussing Oracle Advanced Data Protection and Workflows. Before we begin, if you have not seen the previous webinar, I would encourage you to head over to our YouTube page. That's going to be at YouTube/C as in Charlie /Actifio Enablement Team. We've got a bunch of great Oracle content already over there. We're going to be covering a lot more today. And for anybody who's not signed up, this is really part one of a two-part series for Oracle Advanced Administration. So if you haven't signed up for the second one, it's going to be a continuation of this. If you're not able to make the second one, I'd ask you to sign up anyway, and I'll go ahead and send you a copy of the video and the slide deck to make sure that you get all this content. We do have a couple of classes, live online classes with our Education Services Manager, Paul Martel, and one of our field service experts, Najib Khan. We've got live remote Sky administration on May 14th through the 18th. And then we've got the live remote database administrator operations class with Najib, and that is on June 18th through the 20th. I am your host today, David Fowler. I'm the manager of the enablement team here at Actifio. Presenting, we have the ever elusive Sridhar Mandapati, the man who will not be photographed. Anybody who came for the previous webinar, you know Sridhar a little bit already. Sridhar has an extensive background as an Oracle DBA in enterprise organizations. He joined us here at Actifio a bit over 2 years ago and has really kind of maximized the way that you can leverage the Actifio solution to manage your Oracle instances. And so without further ado, I will hand this over to Sridhar.
Hi, thanks, Dave. Thanks for your wonderful introduction. So, hi all, good morning. So, I think this is Sridhar Mandapati, so lead Oracle DB and dealing the global service delivery portion. And in continuation with the last webinar, understanding about the Actifio versus the traditional issues which DBAs are facing or encountering on day-to-day basis. And we have seen how addressing the problems using Actifio in the last webinar. So in continuation with that, we are trying to give you more insights on the advanced topics. Okay, let's see and how we can understand how we can deliver these advanced topics in continuation with the previous traditional versus Actifio webinar. And here the agenda for today is actually explaining about the overview and recapping of the previous session, the first webinar, which we have delivered of the basics of the Actifio compared with the traditional DBA challenges, and what is this SLA architect and how to enable this archival of backups and simple mode, and understanding about the Actifio protections and different protections about like standalone protection, rack protection, and protection on data guard. And followed by, I think we'll try to understand about a couple of access methods and how we are going to access the data which you are protecting using Actifio. So using different methods like standard mount, app-aware mount, live clone, and workflows. And at the ending of the session, we are going to see actually how to unmount and remount, whether there is a capable to unmount your images and remount it as well. Okay, so with respect to overview, let me just recap a few things from the previous webinar for those who are not attended previous webinar. So it will give some kind of idea about what we have really covered in this and how Actifio works for Oracle. So as I've explained in the previous webinar, so the Actifio basically works in the power of Oracle. The Actifio Oracle thing integration is actually comes in three basic principles, right? One is capture the data in a Oracle block level native pristine format. We always collect the data at block level in Oracle native pristine format as part of our capture process using our main API calls. And once you have protected the data, once you capture the data, and we manage the data at our appliance level, and you can use the data for your business continuity or maybe analytics purpose, data mobility, and dev and test operations, and you can use the data for whatever you want actually. Okay. And how it works for Oracle basically, right? So we do install the Actifio connector on the database server, which is a lightweight kind of software we install on your Oracle database software host server. And right side, you can able to see our appliance is sitting on the right side here. And we will mount a staging disk from our appliance to the Oracle database server as part of second step. And once we mounted the staging disk on your Oracle database host server, and we are going to take the backup using an RMAN API calls, and we are going to run RMAN API to get the changed blocks. The initial copy was a full ingest copy, and all subsequent copies are, as I've explained earlier, these are incremental forever in nature. So we will capture the blocks using this RMAN API calls. And once we have captured the blocks from your database, and we are going to copy those blocks onto our staging disk. And once we are done with our copy to the staging disk, and we are going to unmount the staging disk from your Oracle server. And Actifio takes an internal snapshot, point-in-time synthetic copy, and each and every subsequent DB plus log incremental backups, we are going to collect the Actifio's point-in-time synthetic image copy, which is a point-in-time full copy always. And you can use for the image actually whatever you have collected as part of this collection capture process. And once you're ready with the point-in-time synthetic full copy, and you can use that image for your test dev operations and whatever it is actually. Okay, and let's see actually how to discover from this webinar. We'll try to understand actually a little more about the advanced topics, kind of understanding about how to discover your Oracle applications. And you have a Oracle database, and how to protect that Oracle database. When we say protect, how to capture the data, right? If you're ready to decide taking the backups from Actifio, and let's try to understand how this protection starts and how to discover your Oracle applications so that it will comes under Actifio bucket. So Actifio start taking the backups. And as part of prerequisites, there are very slight small prerequisites we just need to take care before we start the discover and protection process. And make sure that you install Actifio connector on the database host which you are running your database. And of course, confirm your source database is up and running, and you set Oracle SID entry in etc Oratab for Linux systems, or where OPT Oracle for Solaris systems. Confirm database is running in archeolog mode. So this is a prerequisite, it's a mandatory prerequisite to run the database in archeolog mode, because we are using RMAN API calls to capture the data as part of your, when the database is up and running. So make sure that your database is running in archeolog mode. Of course, I think database should be, I think, with associated with a SP file and WebP file. And if you are maintaining a rack configuration, and make sure that your RMAN configuration setting snapshot control file should be located under a shared disk so that it can be accessed by all the nodes. And if it is a standalone system, yeah, you can use a file system, or you can use a ASM disk group to keep this configuring snapshot control file. And enable the block change tracking, which is a BCT feature, which is optional, but still we strongly recommend to enable this BCT feature. The reason I think so, there is a difference between an incremental backup and a fast incremental backup, right? I think if you remember in the last webinar, so the incremental backup, if you are not enabling BCT, it has to read or scan the entire data files to identify the incremental changes. So it's maybe a tedious process, takes time. Though your backup sizes might be a smaller because it is incremental, but the elapsed time was, backup running time was, you don't see any difference. And instead, if you enable BCT at the database level, and if you are taking this incremental block backups, so it is easy to identify the block changes using a block change tracking file and pick up the blocks and speed up the backup. That's why we called as fast incremental backups with BCT. And make sure that your retention policies are configured using Actifio's GUI-based SLA tool. Let's understand what is this SLA tool. Is nothing but like, so when you're maintaining your traditional RMAN backups and you maintain some retention copies, right? Say, for example, you're taking backups to tape and you do maintain some retention copies. Okay, keep this many days of backup copies on the local disk, and maybe keep this many copies on the long retention, which is SBT tape. And you will have retention policies. How do you clean up your archeologs once it is, right? So these kind of retention settings, and what time you need to run your backup, and how it is going to schedule your backup, and if you want to run multiple times, and what I need to do, and if you want to enable this archeolog backup, and what is the setting I need to set. And these things along with this retention policies, it's going to cover in a lightweight tool, which is a SLE architect tool. Okay, the moment you get Actifio GUI, and you can able to navigate through this SLE architect, which I'm going to show you shortly. So this SLE is nothing but, as I've explained, so you need to decide how often your data will be protected, and whether your data deduplicating to a dedupe pool. From the previous webinar, if you remember, I think we are by default, when you're taking the capture process, when you're taking the backup, once we get to the Actifio appliance, we are keeping the backup image under a by default under snap pool, right? But if you want to retention, you can always send this copy to a dedupe pool where we are deduplicating and compressing the backup copy, where you can have a longer retention. So how long you wanted to keep on the primary side, like the hot retention, and how long you wanted to keep on the dedupe pool. So these settings you can do using this SLA, right? And how long you wanted to keep the local snapshots, and the dedupe, how long you wanted to keep this retentions, you can do that actually. And you wanted to replicate this data from a primary Actifio appliance to a DR Actifio appliance. If you remember the last webinar about the replication, and if you want to capture the backup copies and replicate the backup copies once we have captured on the primary appliance, if you want to replicate to a remote DR appliances, and you can use this SLAs to set that policies actually. And how long you wanted to keep your archeolog backup copies, this retention and backup copies, retention especially, and if you want to move these backup copies to a DR appliance and to clean up of the archeologs, and everything comes under this SLA. And you can able to see the screen now on the left hand side, this diagram, and you can go to a SLA architect button here on the Actifio GUI, and you go to your settings, go to a new template and create a new template. The moment you create a new template with a name, it appears on the right hand side, and you can put your policy name, and how want you schedule your backups, and you want to schedule every 24 hours or every 8 hours, whether it is a windowed backup or continuous backup you want to schedule, and how many backup copies you wanted to retain on the snap pool, which is a primary area. And optionally, if you want to enable log backups, archeolog backups, on the right hand side advanced settings, you can able to enable database log backup S, and you can set an RPO. Okay, so this is very simple navigation tool, and you can just open, and with few clicks, maybe a 5 to 6 clicks, you can able to complete your SLA settings. And this SLA you can use for many databases. SLA setting at maybe complete at Actifio appliance level, you can use that SLA setting for if you want to protect multiple databases, and if you want to apply this SLA to multiple databases, you can use this SLA and associated to the multiple databases. And if you have a different requirement to create a different SLA, because I don't want to keep my copies on the primary pool more than 2 days or maybe more than 4 days, I want to keep for 4 days, then you can have a different SLA you can create and assign that SLA to the corresponding DB application. So this is very flexible. If you want to create multiple, you can create and assign those SLAs to the corresponding the database application. To understand, once you enable the LogSmart policy, so in the previous screen, you just enable database log backup option. In the drop down, you select S. So the moment you select S in the advanced settings of SLA, and you choose your archeolog backups running from Actifio. And if you remember, there is a RPO button in the previous slide. I think that is a default. I think it is minimum. We are supporting 15 minutes, but you can select any of the time minutes. Like, so we are actually offering the RPO minimum of 15 minutes, and you can choose 30, 45, 60, and whatever the based on your requirement of RPO. So just give you a just basic overview of the RPO. What is an RPO? RPO is nothing but recovery point objective. It's simply, I think, the amount of data we are referring at risk as part of disaster. In case of a disaster occurs, how much data can I afford to lose, which decides the RPO. So this amount of data is basically determined by the two factors, right? The length of the time between two database backups. And if you're choosing a daily DB plus log incremental backup, on top of that, if you're choosing a LogSmart policy, and based on RPO, if you are setting a 15 minutes, along with regular daily incremental backup, we are also going to run every 15 minutes archeolog backup, right? So if you are selecting RPO 15 minutes, your RPO 15 minutes means the length of the time between two archival backups is 15 minutes. So how much data can I afford to lose to answer this? And I can afford to lose a 15 minutes data because I'm setting my SLA as 15 minutes, right? This is trying to just give you an overview about what is an RPO. Still, it doesn't mean that like if you're selecting a minimum of 15 minutes, we are going to lose 15 minutes of data, right? We are capturing the data and the last 15 minutes, sorry, and the last 15 minutes you can able to always take from your DB host in case of a disaster, and you can add to the on top of Actifio captured logs so that you're not going to lose anything. But with respect to the Actifio is offering the bare minimum of 15 minutes RPO, but you can start from there and you can extend, because the minimum of 15 minutes RPO you cannot able to reduce of various regions, right? Because we need to capture the logs from your and do a sending to that snap pool and maintain these copies, and there is a time delays, right? So that's the reason I think we have decided a best figure of 15 minutes as a lower RPO which we are offering. And you can able to see on the screen, which is clearly explaining, right? So we have a incremental backup runs at 12 a.m., completes at 12 a.m. And assume that your RPO you set at 60 minutes. So I'm going to run archaeolog backup at 1 a.m., 2 a.m., and 3 a.m., right? Say, for example, the disaster occurs at 3:15 a.m. So you are very clear that I think we have Actifio capture data until this portion, right? So you can use until this portion using Actifio, you can able to recover. On top of that, you can have your production logs apply to this copy so that you will have a complete recovery, right? So log smart policy, to just give you more insights about log smart policy, the moment you enable database log backup option S in your SLA advanced settings, you are under Actifio log smart policy backup, which means that we are taking along with your daily incremental backups, we are also taking your archaeolog backups based on your RPO. If you set RPO as 15 minutes, we are going to take archaeolog backups 15 minutes, every 15 minutes. Right? The smallest interval, as I said, like we are offering is 15 minutes. And this log smart policy backups is really, as you know, I think once we have an archive redo logs on top of your daily DB incremental backups, and you can have a roll forward time point in time recovery, right? Using a daily incremental backup on top of your SLA log smart policy archaeolog backups, if you combine, and you can choose an image and you can do a roll forward to wherever you want based on available archive logs. So that is the beauty of this log smart policy. And you can just go to advanced settings of SLA and enable database log backup S and RPO you set. Now you are under SLA policy of log smart policy. And if you want to run archaeolog backups using Actifio along with regular your incremental backups, you have to just go to same SLA advanced setting. You just need to choose these options and save your changes so that you are under Actifio log smart policy. So we are able to take the archaeolog backups based on you set RPO. And along with that, maybe once you enable this log smart policy, now you understand that we are able to take the logs archaeolog backups as well using Actifio. And even though this is optional, we strongly recommend it to go with that so that you will have using Actifio image, you can do a roll forward recoveries easily, right? And if you want to truncate and purge logs after the backup, so now Actifio is capable to take the archaeolog backups as well once you enable log smart policy option. And if you want to choose, as Actifio is taking these archaeolog backups, and I'm leaving to Actifio to clean up the logs as well, right? If you want to clean up these archaeologs, once the Actifio is backed up and you have a settings, right, you can see the right hand side, truncate, purge log after backup. And if you are selecting this truncate, purge log after backup on the drop down, so yes, truncate, purge and log the backup logs after the backup. So then each and every log smart policy backups we are running based on your RPO setting. Say for example, assume your RPO is 60 minutes and we are taking archaeolog backups every 60 minutes, and we are going to clean up the archaeologs which are older than the retention. So that is actually an awesome feature. You don't need to worry about your cleaning up the logs, since we are taking the backup of archaeologs using a log smart policy, and we are capable to delete the logs as well using this. And there is a setting log purge retention period, and this is a value we'll give, and this is a setting you can set. Say for example, if you are setting this log purge retention period for 24 hours, right? Whenever we run the archeolog backups, and we'll make sure that we back up the logs, and we'll keep the logs which are older than 24 hours. We are going to clean ups based on your log purge retention period value. So these settings are, as I said, like these are simple settings in SLA, and you set one time and use that SLA for any database, and we will take care about the all your backups and cleaning up the logs on your FRA location or wherever you are keeping your archeologs. To understand about more about log smart policy, so couple more parameters to understand in a deeper dive. So one is log backup retention period, right? On the SLA advanced settings, you can have an options log backup retention period. On the right hand side, you can able to see in this diagram this log backup retention period. And if you want to decide like how long you wanted to keep log backup copies on Actifio staging disk, like you are running the archeolog backups by enabling log smart policy, and we are taking the archeolog backups and we are keeping on Actifio staging disk, and how long you wanted to keep this backup copies, which decides a parameter called log backup retention period. And optionally, you are taking backups and you are using Actifio staging disk for keeping your log backup copies, right? It is eventually you are growing the Actifio staging disk because you are keeping the archeolog backup copies onto the Actifio staging disk. But you don't need to worry about, and there are a couple more settings like log staging disk size growth, and you can give some 20%. So whenever it needs, and it is going to expand automatically, you don't need to worry about space issues and all to keep your log backup copies. And eventually we make sure that your backup never fails due to space issues. And these settings you can just go with the SLA, and you can just set these values at SLA level using a GUI option. So as I said, like it is applicable. You can use this SLA for one database or many other database to maintain the same SLA. And estimated change rate, either you can choose this log staging disk size growth, or you can have an estimated change rate. And you know that your archeolog generation on your database, say for example, it changes, right? So there might be a business changes, or maybe a business grow plans, and eventually your customers may be increasing, and you will have the archeolog generation. It maybe varies from day to day or month to month. And if you are giving some estimated change rate, and whenever we wanted to expand this, whenever we wanted to expand the staging disk to keep the archeolog backup copies, and we will check this estimated change rate, and we will expand this log staging disk as per the estimated change rate, and we'll make sure that you will not get into the space issues, and we are not going to fail your archeolog backups for any reason. And optionally, I think if you think that okay, we are generating more archeologs and maybe a log staging disk, I'm going to do some favor. I'm going to compress my archeolog backups and keep the copies onto the Actifio staging disk as part of log smart policy jobs. Yes, you can enable this compress database log backup. It is a tick box, and you can enable this so that if you're disabling, and we will run the archeolog backups in a regular fashion, and if you're enabling this compressed database log backup as part of log smart policy, when you are taking the archeolog backups, we will compress and make sure that we are keeping log stages after compression.
Sridhar,
and these basically, I think it gives you.
You've had a little bit of latency. Could I ask you to repeat maybe the last bullet point and start again from there?
Sure, Dave. Thank you.
Thank you.
So to continuation with the settings. So this is another setting which we are giving. So this is a compressed database log backup. So this compressed database log backup, if you choose this in SLA advanced settings, compressed database log backup checked. So we make sure that we will compress the archeolog backup as we are taking the archeolog backups. When we are compressing it and we are keeping on the log staging disk, maybe a size going to reduce a little bit compared with the traditional size, right? If you are generating the more archeologs and you feel that I want to compress because I can save some space at the log staging disk at Actifio side, so you can enable this compression and you can save it. And the next time when you run the archeolog backup, all the subsequent archeolog backups, we are going to compress and save the copies onto the log staging disk. So now try to understand. Now we hope you have a complete idea now what is SLA and how do you set your settings, like how long you wanted to keep your backup copies and about the retention, or maybe how to clean up your archeologs. And these settings you can use SLA architect tool and using some clicks and enter some data, and based on your retention values and how to clean up your logs and you just enter few values and save the settings, and you can use this SLA for your database protections, which means for your database backups. And we'll try to understand now how Actifio is protecting, how offering the protection for standalone systems and the rack systems and the data guard systems. And we do support, as I explained in the previous webinar, we do support all the versions of the database, like starting from 10G, enterprise and standard editions, and we do support systems like standalone, rack, and data guard. Okay. In protection process, again, you just need to go to the Actifio desktop and you discover the application. And once you have your application ready on the application manager, and you just need to go to the protection button. Here you can see on the top right hand side, left side, and you can choose the corresponding template and profile. The moment you create a SLA template in the previous slides, it is going to create a template and a profile. So you can choose the corresponding template and profile which you have created, and your database is ready for protection, right? And in advanced settings, and you have a couple more options in the advanced settings as part of your protection. And this is very simple, as I've explained in the previous screen. You just need to select your application in Actifio screen, Actifio GUI, and you select the desired template which you have created as part of your SLA settings, and go to advanced settings, and you can see a couple more advanced settings here. And you have a lot of settings, but let me explain you a few advanced settings as part of your database protection. Once you are protecting the application, and you can choose these application advanced settings, and you enter your database username and password which you are trying to protect, and which you are trying to protect in the sense like which you are trying to take the backup using Actifio, and you just enter username and password, and the role of the database, like the user belongs to a sysdba role, and you have an option to select the role as sysdba here. You can able to see on the right hand side. And Oracle service name, when you are choosing this DB authentication mode by entering the username and password with the DB authentication, and if you remember in the previous webinar, we have explained about the authentication, DB authentication and OS authentication. And if you are choosing a OS authentication, you don't need to enter these username and password and role values. It is not mandatory, because we will connect to your target database server, and we connect to your Oracle user, OS user, and from there we are able to connect to your database. But if you're going with the DB authentication, you can enter the corresponding database username and password, which is having a sysdba role, so that we can use this user to take the backups. And Oracle service name, which is your TNS service name, you can keep that under your TNS names.vara on your DB host, so that when you are connecting to the database using this username and password, and using a SQL plus authentication method, for example, SQL plus username / password @TNS entry as is DBA. So we are going to connect in that fashion to your database and take the backups. And same as for RMAN. Well, you're connecting to the RMAN to make the RMAN API calls. We will use this user and make sure that this is a sysdba privileged user, and use that user for taking the RMAN backups as well. And archeolog service name. And if you want have a rack environment, and you might be having multiple nodes, right? Say, for example, you have a 2-node cluster, and I want to run my backup always from node 1. So you can have a node 1 service name, TNS entry, enter this in Oracle service name. But I want to run always my archeolog backups from node 2. In that case, you have to give a TNS entry, which is pointing to the node 2 service, right? So that's the reason you can have this archeolog service name and separate your service name for your archeologs, or optional if you're leaving it as a blank, and we will take the primary service name and connect to the database and take the archeolog backups. And allocation unit size as part of ASM, and if you are protecting your database which is running on ASM, and as part of that, if you remember, we capture methods in 2 ways, right? One is if your source database is running on ASM, and we are going to mount our staging disk from our appliance to the database host in the form of ASM disk group. If your source database is running on file system, and we are going to mount our staging disk in the form of file system to our DB host, so that when you are taking the backup to the ASM disk group, or when we are taking backup to the file system, we are going to unmount from your host, and we are going to keep it under appliance. And to create that ASM disk group, to speed up maybe if you want to create with a different allocation unit size, because we are creating ASM disk group, we are mounting disk on your DB host, and we are making it as a ASM disk group as part of backup, and we are taking backup to this ASM disk group. And if you want to create this ASM disk group with a different allocation unit size, and you can choose this allocation unit size. And if you have a multiple Oracle homes, and if you want to take a database backup, which is belongs to a particular home, and you can specify the particular TNS admin path for the particular database. And optionally, I think you can use even the convert ASM format to file system format, another advanced setting option. And if you are choosing this option, if your database is running on ASM, but still we are going to take the backup as form of file system, so that you can use this file system backup to create a cloned copies on a file system target host. And vice versa feature is also available, convert file system format to ASM format. And the rack member nodes. And this advanced settings, basically you have a 4-node cluster, rack cluster, but I wanted to run backup from only 2 nodes. Then you enter the specific nodes into the rack member nodes advanced settings option, and we are going to run a load balance backup across these 2 nodes. And you have many more settings. I'm just trying to cover a few settings, few important settings here. Though once you are done with your screen, all these settings were done, and now you save the changes. Now you are ready with your production, right? Once you are ready with your production, you can able to see this screen. It is going to change from a red color to a blue a drum symbol and a database symbol. You can able to see now you are ready to run the backups using Actifio. Now try to understand what kind of protections we are offering from Actifio. And standalone, as the name suggests, I think standalone database runs on a maybe a standalone node or kind of a single node, right? So make sure that we met all the prerequisites as I've explained earlier. So database should be up and running, and optionally you should enable BCT and make an entry in etc Vora tab. And once you are done with all this, you make sure that your database is running on archeolog mode. Once you have a basic prerequisites and you are under Actifio protection, and as I explained in the previous 2 slides, you just need to open that application manager in Actifio GUI and select your application and select the template and select the application advanced settings and save. So now your database is ready for production, and based on your SLA schedule, it is going to start running the backups. And if you see in the standalone, and you will have an Actifio, and we will discover your database and discover your database application. And once you start entering the SLA, and once you're ready with the protection settings, and your database is ready. And this is a kind of a diagram, I think, which represents kind of a Actifio appliance and your source DB host. When it comes to the rack, so let me explain how we are actually protecting under rack. And imagine that you have a 2-node cluster, which is a node 1 and node 2, and here it is Actifio. And if you want to run the backup across the nodes, so that instead of running against a single node, the backup might be a bit slower. And instead, if you are actually spreading the load between the 2 nodes, right, your backup may be much faster, and you can complete your backups in a little earlier. And to run that, and believe you remember when I am explaining the advanced settings, we have Oracle service name, which is a TNS entry service name, which you are going to use to connect to the database, right? And you can create a service using SRVCTL method and use that service across the nodes, right? When you are creating service, you can create service for these 2 instance 1 and instance 2, which is nothing but you're going to create a service which can use to connect to the database. If you're using that service to connecting to the rack databases, and it can connect to node 1 or it can connect to the node 2 instance, and use that service name, and make sure that you keep that service name as a TNS entry in node 1 and node 2, and you start protection using Actifio. And there is one more advanced settings. If you remember rack member nodes, you add these 2 IPs in the rack member nodes in the advanced setting, and just save the changes. That's it. So the subsequent backups, it is going to land the connections, and if you're opening the channels are going to land onto both node 1 and node 2, so that you are load balancing your backup across the nodes. And optionally, if you want, you can even choose the node 1 to connect to the data, only connecting to the node 1 and run your backups. But to speed up the backups, to do the load balance backups across the nodes, and you create a service using SRVCTL and use that service name in your TNS. And once you are running the database backups using Actifio, using the corresponding service, it is going to open the sessions against node 1 and node 2 run the backups. And coming to the data guard, so we do also protect from the data guard. If you're having a physical standby database and which is in a read-only mode, and we are, or maybe it is in a mount mode, so we are capable to run the backups even from the physical standby mode. But we always, I think the reason I think we are performing some couple of commands actually as a prerequisites on the database, basic select commands to see everything is fine or not, so that we always suggest to put the database physical standby in a read-only mode using an active data guard, so that when we are running, you can always take the backup, like how you are protecting your primary, and you can the same way, or how you are protecting your standalone database, and in the same way you can protect your standby database as well, physical standby database as well. But as part of backup, we make sure that we perform a switch by connecting to the primary, so that all the changes are getting transferred to the standby environment. And we make sure that before we kick off a RMAN API calls on the standby, we are going to connect to the primary and make a switch. This is a traditional best practice, and this how it works in the data guard. And if you have, again, the data guard, if you have multiple nodes, and if you want to load balance on the data guard multiple nodes, as explained in the previous rack protection slides, you can have a service created between the nodes on the standby side, and you can maintain the service name and use that service name when you are taking the backup from the physical standby. Hope, I think now we understand Actifio supports the standalone systems, whether it is a standalone file system or standalone ASM and data guard and rack.
Hi, Sridhar. I've got a great question about ASM in the queue here. I wonder if we could take a moment to answer it. The question is, if you do a file system to ASM conversion during capture, what would happen when the staging disk mounts back to the file system format database using a converted ASM format? Will this impact CBT, or will we continue in the incremental model?
No, you can continue with the same incremental model. The moment, say for example, your source database is running on a file system, and you selected convert file system format to ASM format, and you are running the backups, right? So the way we are capturing the block changes will not change, and the way you can mount you and the subsequent incremental backups fashion is not going to change. The only difference, you can have this backup image to create an ASM format databases, right? So there is no change in the process, as we like a normal protection, how we are processing in the normal protection, and we do continue with the same, or capturing the block changes and appliance intelligence, and use that image copies for various DevOps operations or mounts. There is no change in the process.
Great, thank you for covering that.
Thank you. And I think the another beautiful feature of Actifio is also supporting the TAF, which is a transparent failover of Actifio RMAN backup. Say for example, you have a 2-node cluster, and you've decided to run always Actifio backup from node 1. But for any reason, if node 1 is down, and Actifio is capable to do a failover to the node 2 and continue the backup. And there is a settings in advanced settings, you can able to see that failover node choice advanced setting option, and using that you can able to, when you're protecting a node 1, and when you're running a backup, and if there is a issue and node 1 is down for some reason when you're starting backup, and it is going to fail over to the node 2 and continue the backup. In the next slide, you can able to see the corresponding advanced setting option. And here is the option we provide in the application advanced settings. And if you remember the advanced settings which I showed you as part of protection process, like username, password, role, Oracle service name, in the same screen you can have this failover choice, node IP, and service name. And you can have this failover choice IP, node IP, to which node you wanted to failover, and you can just save the changes. So whenever a situation comes, and we automatically failover to the node 2 and continue the backup. And now we know that Actifio is supporting various production methods, and we do support standalone, rack, data guard, and even we do support a failover scenario as well. So eventually, if one node down, we are not stopping, or we are not failing the backups, and eventually we do a TAF transparent application failover to the corresponding node based on your advanced setting option, and we continue the backups. Now we have a captured data. You are protected and you are taking backups. So Actifio is backing up the data. Actifio is capturing the data. So as I've explained now, so Actifio, once we capture, we manage the data. Internally, we create a snapshot, and each and every day we are going to create a PIT synthetic full image, which is a point-in-time recovery full image copy. And now you can use these image copies for various purposes. You can access this data using a different methods actually. Let us see what are the various methods which we can use to access the data. So the popular methods you can have, like you can do cloning, we called as a mount operations, which is a standard mount, and application aware mounts, and the second option is workflows, right? You can use this any of the options, and you can select your backup image. Say for example, you have a backup image of April 18th, you select the backup image of April 18th. If you want to roll forward to April 20th, yes, you can do that. And based on your available of archive log backup copies, based on your log backup retention period, so you can do a roll forward. So we are capable to do a point in time recovery using the image, or we are capable to do a roll forward recovery using the image and along with the available archive logs. Let's just understand what is this mounts. So when you are performing this Actifio mount function, when you're going to instantly access the data, right? This mount, when you're keeping this mount copies, and it offers, Actifio offers two kind of standard mount and application aware mount, right? So once we are capturing the data, and you can use that capture data for various purposes, as I explained earlier, right? So as part of this mount option, and Actifio provides two ways to mount your Oracle database on the target host, on the same host, or on the same host. So standard mount and application aware mount. The standard mount, once you're selecting the backup image, and once you're choosing the standard mount option, and make sure that Actifio is going to, on the target host, it is going to present as a file system based on your target host or source database is running on ASM. It is going to present as a ASM based on your protection settings. If you're selecting some conversion ASM to format to file system format, it is going to present as a file system. Otherwise, by default, how we are protecting, and we are going to present in the same way. If it is protecting using an ASM, and we are going to present as an ASM. If your protection is a file system, we are going to present as a file system on the target host. And once we are created this ASM disk group or file system on the target host, we are going to copy all the required copies to perform a cloning. So required copies to perform a cloning, like your database data file backup copies, archive log copies, a server parameter file copies, a control file copies. All these artifacts we will bundle together and will place and host and actually display as a file system or an ASM disk group on the target host, right? Coming to the application aware mount, we do the same thing, like you present everything on the target host required for the cloning, and we also brings up the database automatically, right? The moment you select application aware mount and fill up these couple of application aware mount browsing options, and you just take a break in 15 minutes and your database is ready. So we are going to mount, we are going to open your database automatically. We create and open the database for you. Now let's see, understand.
Hey, Sridhar, on that topic, if there are customized settings within the managed Oracle instance, do those also get backed up when we do a recovery or restore amount? Do we need to re-implement those custom settings, or will they be brought back with our restore?
No, the custom settings related to your parameter file settings and everything. And if you are setting the parameters, say for example, your custom setting, and we are going to copy everything from your primary. So we are not going to, we are make sure that we are not missing anything from the primary, and we'll make sure that all custom settings are actually copied onto the target host.
Thank you.
Now let's understand, we have two different types of mount, standard mount and app aware mount. And what is a standard mount? As I explained earlier, we are going to capture from the production, and you have a backup image, and this backup image contains your database file copies and archive log copies, a server parameter file and control file. When you are selecting the standard mount on the target host, and we are going to keep this backup image as it is, but we are not going to bring up the database. But what are the artifacts required for a kind of a cloning in a traditional way? And we do actually take that backup image and copy and keep a backup image on the target host. And you can use this standard mount for various operations, right? Say for example, on the source side, your data file got corrupted, or maybe your table space has some issue and corrupted, and you can do immediately a standard mount. You will get all the artifacts, then catalog these copies and restore your data file, recover your data file, then restore your table space or recover your table space. And for kind of those operations, and this standard mount is really good. And to this standard mount, I think prerequisites. So it's make sure that your Oracle versions on the source and target database host, which you are trying to perform a standard host, standard mount, and should be equal. And if you are creating an ASM disk group, and make sure that on the captured you're creating as part of your target host, how it is, for example, if your target host is running in a file system, and if your source is running an ASM, say for example, and you cannot use that ASM backup image to create this standard mount on the file system side, right? Because you can do the standard mount, but you cannot directly utilize. You have to catalog and maybe a switch copies and do the some operations. But and make sure that if your the source and target host are both are on the same versions, or maybe a same kind of capture methods like ASM, file system, it is very easy to manage. And the standard mount is very simple. Earlier, I think if you remember, I think under protection, I think you have done the protection, you can able to see this blue symbol. Now Actifio is taking the backups. And once Actifio is running the backup, on the right hand side, it is creating the backup image copies right here. And the latest image copy, it is going to highlight with a green color. And you select the latest image copy and mount. The moment you click mount, and it is going to appear a mount screen, and you have to enter a text for a label to just label your mount operation. And you select a host where you wanted to keep your target, where you wanted to keep the standard mount on which host, and mount point. If say for example it is a file system, you can give a kind of a name to your mount point and what name you wanted to mount this copy onto the target host. And this is an option. If you're not specifying now, we will create a name by default, and you just click a mount operation. Now once this mount was done and the job was running, you can able to see this mount operation job was running, and after few minutes, and you can able to see this mount job has got succeeded. And you can able to see now we are doing a standard mount, right? You can able to see that corresponding image. And if you go to the same restore tab under Actifio application manager GUI, and you can able to see your mount image, you can able to see the listing here. And you can go to a target host, and you can see your mount has actually mounted that image /act standard mount test I've given in the name. So you can able to see, and it is going to create all the artifacts, your database file, archeolog files, and your parameter file, and your trace control file, and your regular control file. It's going to keep everything into the file system. And if it is ASM, it's going to create an ASM disk group and keep everything under ASM disk group. And this is how.
Hi, Sridhar. But while we're on ASM disk groups, quick question. How does ASM recognize that the new disk group is ASM without some form of stamping the disks from the ASM instance? How do we identify those ASM disks?
Okay, so the question is related to identify what are the ASM disks are mapped from Actifio. I think this naming convention, if you are not specifying a naming convention as part of your protections, and Actifio creates ACT, start with ACT underscore your database name, and that's where you can able to recognize the ASM disk group name as part of your protection. Or optionally, when you are protecting, and if you want to give a specific name, say for example your database is ORCL, I wanted to give my ASM disk group name. When Actifio is creating mounting staging disk and creating ASM disk group, if you want to give a specific name, and you have an option on the mount screen, you have an option to provide the name. If you are not providing name, we will create a optionally act underscore db name. Else we are going to obey your parameter setting, because you are giving a name to your ASM disk group, and we will create ASM disk group by your name setting.
Thanks, Sridhar. And one more while we're on this slide. When we mount the file system of the database directory to the target, but don't activate the database, will it come online automatically? Do we need to activate it manually? So once we've got everything in place, how do we then leverage it? What would be the expected behavior be?
Yep. So once we have this standard mount, once you have created, as I mentioned earlier, and we will create all the archeolog folder, database folder, what are the artifacts required we are going to create? And in a traditional way, what are the things we have? We need to create a cloned environment. And the next step, if you want, and if you're familiar with the regular cloning steps, you can use and do that. Or you wanted to use these copies and create a database using an arm and duplicate target, you can use that. Or we will provide a CLI commands, and using the CLI commands, now we have mounted that, and you can use the CLI command to run and brings up your database. And you don't need to do any steps manually, and we do provide all the CLI commands. Once you are done with your standard mount and run the CLI commands, very simple commands, maybe a single line commands, and it's going to bring up your database online. But if you want a database online, go with the next option, which I'm going to tell you, like app aware mount. So this option, standard mount, is basically very useful on the source side, say for example, some data files are corrupted or some table space has been corrupted, then immediately you just do a standard mount, you will get all the artifacts and catalog those copies and just restore the data file or recover your data file from the standard mount. So that is the beauty of the standard mount. But still, you can, if you want, optionally you can do a standard mount and run this CLI, simple CLI commands. You can able to see this example here. So here I think I was mentioning act mnt job. This is the mount point, because in the previous slide, and I'm specifying a mount point, it is creating a mount point like /act standard mount test. If I'm not specifying, it is going to create a mount point like this. So whenever you're running this CLI command, you are passing that mount operation, like the mount complete name, so that we are going to process and we are going to bring up your database online. So you don't need to worry about after even standard mount, you don't need to again run your DB steps to perform cloning and what I need to do and all, because we do provide excellent CLI commands and CLI options, and you just need to run one simple command to again brings up the database online.
Thank you, Sridhar. And for the audience, this slide and the next couple are very CLI heavy. I want to draw your attention to the screenshot button at the top of your UI there to go ahead and grab it. And I will also be sending you a copy of this deck, so you'll have copy and pastable text. Thank you for grabbing that question, Sridhar.
And now we understand about what is a standard mount. Let me explain you a little more about the application aware mount. We have covered the application aware mount, when you know that app aware mount, not like standard mount, it is going to bring up your database online, right? And production database and Actifio capturing, and we are keeping the backup image. And once we are doing a standard mount process, we are just bringing a backup image on the target host. But once we are going with the app aware mount process, along with keeping the backup image contents, and we are going to use that and brings up your database automatically. This is an additional function. That's the reason we called as a application aware mount. We brings up the database completely automatically. I think this method, if you want to create a quick DevOps operations, like if you want to create a multiple cloning environments or a multiple test environments, you go with this app aware mount, and it brings up the database automatically on the target host or on the same host, wherever you wanted to select. And this app aware mount is basically, I think in the standard mount, at least a DBA intervention is required to bring up the database or to do some restore and recovery operations, particular data file and table space. But coming to the app aware mount, no manual intervention is required. And there will be, as part of app aware mount, you will have some provisioning options to set your database ID and how much memory you want to set, which I'm going to show you. And apart from that, you don't need to fill up anything, and you just complete everything and save and set submit, and it's going to bring up your database in a few minutes. Okay. And if you are capturing if you're enabling the log smart policy, as I've explained earlier, the moment you enable log smart policy and you are taking archive log backups as well along with your DB plus log backups. So the moment you do this, and we are going to, you have a facility when you are performing this app aware mount, and you can do this roll forward time recovery as well. Let me show you that and how it's going to work in the next slide. And you use this app aware mount databases, as I mentioned, for your reporting purpose, or maybe kind of a DevOps purpose, or maybe your analytics purpose, whatever you wanted to use for your development test operations, you can use, and you can create a number of app aware mount database on the target host. And this standard mount and the app aware mounts are basically virtual copies, right? We are not physically copying the data when we are doing this app aware mount. When you are presenting this standard mount or app aware mount on your hosts, these are virtual, right? But you don't feel like this is a virtual DB and maybe something different I need to learn and all. This is nothing. The word may be just virtual DB. It means that we are not copying the data physically onto your target host, but you have a references to the Actifio appliance where we are keeping the images. That's the reason we are completing this app aware mount. Even your source database size is maybe 100 terabyte, and your source database backup size is maybe, say, for example, 100 terabyte in size. We don't care actually, because we are going to create app aware mounts in very less than maybe 15 minutes or 20 minutes. And these are the provisioning options as part of app aware mount, and you will get a screen, and there you can find all these provisioning options. And you have your target database SID, what database name you wanted to set, and username and password. This is a target database host which you have selected, the Oracle username. The password is not mandatory. And Oracle home directory TNS admin path. You can have multiple Oracle homes on the target host, but if you want to choose a specific home to create your app aware mount databases, you have to give the specific details, and the database memory size, and how much you wanted to give for SGA %, And if you are allocating some to SGA%, say for example, here in database memory size, you are giving 2 GB, and you are selecting SGA% is 70. Then 70% of size you are giving, out of 2 GB you are giving to SGA, rest 30% you are giving to PGA. And you can see many options here, redo size, and you have a shared pool size, DB cache size. If you want to specify all these, maximum number of processors, open cursors. And if you are not specifying these values, still we are going to default to some value, right? And how to do this app aware mounts? Same like now you imagine that you've protected your application, and you can see the backup images for the application here in the right hand side, and you choose your latest backup. And with the moment you choose your latest backup, and you can able to see a recovery range. And this recovery range, it denotes your enabled log smart policy backups. Even though your backup image, say for example, your backup image time at some particular time, which is on, you can see here, this is at 22:13 or something, but but we can able to recover up to 22:31, because on top of your regular backup, and you have your archeolog backups as well, and we will cover once you're every day on incrementally you are running db plus log incremental backups, and on top of that, based on your SLA, you are selecting you are running archeolog backups, right? The moment you select a daily point in time image, on top of that available archeolog backups, and we do completely cover all those things, and you can have an option to roll forward using that image. You can have a roll forward recovery. You can see in the next slide, the moment you select the mount, and you will get a like mount operation, you can see all these. And here I think someone asked the question earlier, and how do I know which disk group name which was created? And you will get like this option. You can specify a disk group name, and if you're not specifying, we will create a default disk group name. But if you are specifying, we will create a disk group name using this. As part of app aware mount, you are giving this disk group name, which means that when we are creating a cloned environment, cloned copy, that copy is going to use this disk group actually. And if you are on a rack, you can specify the rack number nodes list here. Like if you have a multiple rack nodes, if you want to create this cloned copy as a rack instance, and you specify the nodes, the moment you complete, we are going to complete the clone on rack instances. This instance is going to, this clone database, app aware mount clone database is going to run at the end of the operation. It's going to run on the both the nodes, or how many nodes you selected here. It is going to create the instance on the particular nodes. And here are the application app aware mount provisioning settings, I think, which I'm referring, your database SID, TNS admin, SGS size, and all. On top, you can able to see this roll forward option, right? And once you are enabling this log smart policy, and we will give you an option to roll forward that image to whatever you have. Say, for example, right now the archeologs are available up to this time. So you can use that image and roll forward, and you can scroll this actually. I think this was a diagram. You can able to, I cannot show you the scrolling, but you can use this button to scroll wherever you wanted to roll forward. If you want to roll forward to a particular this time, yeah, just move this to here and go with the options and next. And make sure that whatever your settings and measure, we are going to display once again, just to cross check. If you have any problem, just go to previous and do the changes, or just submit the done button, and your app aware mount is going to complete. The moment app aware is completed, and you can check this app aware mount is completed successfully or not using some validation. You can go to your target host and set that Oracle SID, and you can connect SSDB and check name and open mode for the database, and it should be in a read-write mode. And also you can see on the Linux DB servers, ps-ef grep daemon, you can able to see the DBs listed onto that. And under Actifio GUI, you can go to a domain manager section. Under images, you can able to see the new image, which we are called as a mounted image. When you are doing a standard mount, or when you are doing an app aware mount, we are going to call as a mounted image. We are going to create an appliance side. You can able to see those images. And this is a validation, simple validation. You can able to complete app aware mount process validation less than 30 minutes, and your database is ready irrespective of your source database size. And standard mount, and here also you have a CLI methods for app aware mount. Say for example, for a DevOps purpose, I wanted to create, or I wanted to refresh my app aware mount database on daily basis, or I want to create new app aware mount or new test and dev databases as part of my DevOps process. And you are using some Jenkins tool, some kind of automation tool to do this. Yeah, we will provide a CLI commands as like standard mounts. We will provide a CLI commands for even app aware mounts. And using this even CLI methods, you can create app aware mounts. So only thing, few input parameters, whatever the provisioning options in the GUI, and if you remember, we are calling all the provisioning options in CLI, database SID and Oracle Home, TNS admin directory, total memory, SGA%, many more. I'm just trying to give a short view, and you can have this command and create an app aware mount. And maybe people are not interested to run from GUI and have a simple this line command and run this, and it is going to create an app aware mount database. And we do provide a CLI for app aware mount databases as well. On the next slide, you can able to see a couple more examples and how to create this app aware mount for different databases. Your source is running on, here S is nothing but source and T is nothing but target. And source is running on standard ASM, but you wanted to create a app aware mount copy on rack ASM. You have multiple nodes, and you can see here in CLI option ASM rack node list, and we are providing. And if you want to create a specific group name, this group name, you can give a this group name. If you are not specifying, we will create a default name. So you don't feel any difference between a CGUI and CLI, and both are very convenient, and people are maybe very interested to do the things from the CLI, or maybe you wanted to integrate these commands into your DevOps or Jenkins process to call from shell script or to call from an automated processes, and you can use these commands and you can keep it there, and you can create this app aware mount DBs, and you can call on a scheduled basis. Now let us understand, now hope you understand about what is the mount and standard mount and app aware mount, and coming, and maybe which we explained on the previous webinar session about live clone and workflows. To automate this access and to automate the access of your app aware mount databases, you wanted to create on daily basis or daily 2 times, and how do you automate? And using this workflows concept, you can able to automate the access of data, means automation of the creating app aware mount databases, automation of creating your standard mounts. This you can automate using this workflows concept. And before workflows, a live clone is a separate access method. A live clone, not unlike your standard mount and app aware mount, those are virtual. And live clone method, we are going to create a physical copy. The moment you create a live clone, you are choosing a live clone, and we are going to create a database by copying the data from Actifio appliance to the physical. Like if you are selecting a desired host, and if you are making this live clone, if you want to create a live clone on some particular host, as like app aware mount, we do the process and we'll bring up the database. But the difference is here, not only just mounting the ASM disk group, and we copy all the files physically, backup files to the target host, right? This is a physical. That's the reason this live clone takes little time based on your DB size and backup size. But you can use this live clone images for masking the data. Say, for example, you have a source database, you have a PCA data like your credit card or PIN number, whatever. But as part of your app aware mount, if you are creating an app aware mount database, development team and test team can use the data directly. Instead, I wanted to mask the data. I wanted to scrub the PCA data before giving it to the developers. In that case, and you will create a live clone first, and you scrub the data, you mask the data, then use this live clone image to create app aware mounts, so that you can create this, you can use this live clone image to create n number of app aware mount databases, so that the databases which we have created using app aware mount will have a sensitive data masked into a some unscrambled data like XXX, YYY, some garbage character data, right? So you can use this live clone if you have any PCA data, or if you want to do some ETL testing efficiently, so that you can go with this live clone image, create a live clone database, and use that for your performance testing, or maybe kind of a real ETL testing, or masking the data, and use that image to create a multiple app aware mount databases. In the next screen, you will understand a little more. So as I said, like workflows is going to use to automate the access of the captured data, which means you can automate your app aware mount process, you can automate your direct mounts and whatever you wanted to see. And under workflows, Actifio is offers 2 ways basically. One is a direct mount, and another one is a live clone workflow. And under workflow, we have 2 categories, which is a direct mount workflow and which is a live clone workflow. And direct mount workflow, say for example, this is your backup image. Once you are protected with the Actifio, and Actifio has actually taken a backup image, and this is your backup image of your database, right? In the direct mount workflow, and you can create this workflow, and it creates directly app aware mount database. It is similar to how you are creating app aware mount database manually in the same way. But here the process using workflow we are automating, right? Every day you can schedule, so that if you want, it is going to refresh this mount using this latest image. Say for example, today we have 1 backup image, and tomorrow we will have a latest backup image, right? So every day if you schedule at particular time, and we are going to refresh this mount image, we are going to unmount and delete the previous AppAware mount, and you are going to create a new AppAware mount with same name and everything, the same settings with the latest backup image. It is basically you can schedule it actually. You don't need to run every day or every week, and maybe a weekly twice. If you want to do this, if you want to create or refresh these copies always from production, you can just schedule and leave it actually. And this is a simple way you can able to see here. You select a workflow and just give a name to the workflow, and the moment you select a direct mount workflow, and here you have an option scheduled or on demand, and you can schedule, you can give a schedule and daily or weekly or monthly, and you have a lot of options, and you can choose the time. And like app aware mount, you just fill up the settings. Here you can see perform application aware mount, you fill up the settings and then you submit, and your workflow is ready. Okay, so coming to the live clone workflow, so direct mount workflow, and this is a grade, right? So we are directly going from image, and this direction we are going, and we are creating a mount copy. And a live clone workflow, it allows you to mask. There is an image between your source backup image and the target app aware mount DB, and there is another image which we are calling as a live clone image, right? So using this backup image, you create a live clone and apply your scripts, whatever you want to apply, your masking scripts or whatever, and done with your live clone, because you are already applied the script. Now your live clone image is ready with the masking data. You mask data, you have masked it, and use this image now because it is a physical copy, as I've explained earlier.
I'm sorry, Shrita, you you hit a little bit of latency and got garbled. Could you repeat maybe the last 10 seconds?
So unlike the direct mount workflow, this live clone workflow, in direct mount workflow, if you remember, we are going directly from source image and directly going to the target mount, right? And we don't have any live clone image interaction in the direct mount. We are going in this direction. But coming to the live clone, and you have a basically, I think, complete 3 stages. One is your source backup image stage 1 you collect, and second one you create a live clone image. And this is like how you are creating your app aware mount. In the same way you will create a live clone. I'll show you. And once your live clone image is ready, and you can able to apply your masking scripts. Say for example, you have some sensitive data from production you are getting, and you can apply some masking or scrubbing scripts here. So then live clone image is ready with unmasked data. So basically you completely unmask. So then you can have this image, using this image to create the standard mounts or maybe a direct app aware mounts here, right? So using this live clone, you can able to do whatever you want in the previous step before you actually projecting onto the mount on the dev and test systems. And you can create a live clone image, and if you can apply scripts whatever you want. You, for example, there are some three indexes which are not there in production, and you wanted to create using these indexes when you are doing this app aware mount process, and do this live clone and apply those indexes here, so that this image is ready with all your recent changes which are not in production. And then use this image to create mounts, because this is a physical image like this image, and this is also physical image, because we are copying physically everything to here, not like standard and virtual mount. We are doing a virtual, and here you are copying everything physically here. So this is kind of a physical image, and we are able to track those changes against this, what is happening. Actifio, since it is a physical image, Actifio can track these changes. And whatever the space we are going to utilize to create this live clone image on the host which you have selected, that space comes from the Actifio appliance. Okay, once you have this image, you can treat like this same backup image, and you can create this using this image. You can create app aware mounts. Okay, so this way this live clone workflow works. And same like direct mount workflow, using live clone workflow you can schedule it actually. Let's see how we are scheduling this live clone workflow. And just go to workflows and give some name to the workflow for the particular application. And you will have a schedule and on demand like your direct mount, and you schedule weekly or monthly or daily or whatever. And the source image, always you select latest from the production to snap, because maybe you're just always intended to select the latest image. And you can give some label to the live clone, and what is the pool, where is the size you wanted to use under Actifio appliance. This is, you don't need to worry about this. By default it will come the available free space you can utilize. And there is a steps like mount for pre-processing. The pre-processing is nothing but you create a live clone image and apply your scripts, and you can able to see, and you can able to apply the scripts on this live clone image like your masking scripts, and that is comes under this pre-processing. And this is the script, you can use it, right? So as part of pre-processing, you have an option to choose this post to script data mask.sh. I just created a small shell script and which contains some update statements against my tables. I'm modifying the data to some xxx and yyyy characters, garbage characters. And I'm giving that my script, I know that it's going to take me 15 minutes. Roughly, I'm just giving a timeout. So it is going to wait for 15 minutes to complete this operation. Then this live clone is ready. So once this live clone is ready, and this step is actually explaining about this live clone. And again, you will get one more provisioning options for your actual AppAware mount. If you see this two screens here, and this arrow is grayed in the screen, but you can see this is enabled now because your live clone step is completed. Now the screen, using the screen, you can enter options to create your AppAware mount. You feel like the same AppAware mount. What are the options you generally use? The similar options you will get here for doing an AppAware mount. You complete and submit, and your live clone workflow is ready. So this is the way you can see the AppAware mount options on the next screen, right? For this mount, and you fill all these options like your AppAware mount. And once you're done with that, your live clone workflow is ready, and you can use that for. You scheduled it actually, so it is going to create the copies automatically. It's going to refresh automatically. And now you know that you can mount your databases using standard mount, AppAware mount, or optionally you can go with workflows to automate and mount these things. But how do you unmount and remount? For some reasons, I have some database using AppAware mount. I created some database, but I wanted to stop this database for maybe 10 days. I want to just unmount this database, and this is very simple. You don't need to shut down the database and make it separate, and you need to understand lot. Nothing actually. You can whatever the, as I explained earlier, whatever the mounts we are creating, we are actually treating as a mount image, whether it is a standard mount or whether it is an AppAware mount or whether it is a live clone. We are treating like an image on our side, so we called as a mount images. And you can able to see these mount images as I've explained in the previous slides, right? You can able to see those mount images here on the below. Once you're done with AppAware mounts and all, it's going to list those active images you can able to see here, and you select what are the image you want, and you go to, this is the image. The moment you select image, it is going to appear like this, and you select the settings option, you can unmount. And temporarily you can unmount. After 10 days, maybe you wanted to again remount, and your database will be back. But till the time 10 days, I just wanted to unmount, you can have unmount. Or if you want to delete this copy completely, because I don't want this AppAware mount, I want to delete, you can select that image and just select this unmount and delete operation. It's going to delete permanently. Okay, and once you are unmounting, without unmounting delete, you just maybe unmount. After 10 days, if you want to remount, you can able to see this is image is unmounted state, and you can select this unmounted state image and you can remount as well, and your database will be back online once you are remount. I think that's all for today. Thanks for your patience and your support throughout the session. So we'll meet you soon in the next 2 weeks.
Thanks, Trader. That was great. Now, where this webinar was very kind of UI demonstration heavy, and Sridhar gave some great command line inputs. I'll make sure that you get the deck. We encourage you to kind of reverse engineer what Sridhar has put together, and then apply your own instance names, your own variables, and see how they work for you in your environment. So thanks again, everybody, and have a good day. Thank you for joining us for another YouTube Tech Tip video. If you like the content you're seeing on this channel, please remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you will be alerted to any future content.